Taiwan, as you all know, went to the polls last weekend to elect a new president and parliament. Ching-te from the ruling Taiwan Democratic Progressive Party won the presidency and follows outgoing President Ing-wen. Meanwhile, the parliament flipped, and the KMT became the strongest force, at least one seat ahead of the DPP. The third party won 8 seats. Now, of course, one of the areas of the kind of election and the discussion was the relations with mainland China, which influences in many ways, I think, the whole Asia and the Pacific. Tonight, our panel of experts will be led by no other than Rowan Kallick, who is an industry fellow with us at Griffith Asia Institute and a columnist for the sorry for my German, for the Australian. Rowan is an absolute expert in the field, having lived in mainland China in the 1990s, the 2000s, and the 2010s. So joining Rowan in person, I think you will introduce your panel yourself. Now, I want to also express my sincere gratitude for Holding Redlich for having us here tonight, and very much also to the Australian Institute of International Affairs for co-hosting this event with us, and since also to my team for really putting a lot of work into organizing this event. We have Kelsey here in the background and Fiona somewhere as well. So thank you very much, and I look very much forward to this discussion.
Thanks very much. And that's great for setting us up like that. And just again to remind people, please switch off your phones. They may interfere with people being able to hear us clearly online. I'm particularly honoured to be here because I'm a fellow of, as Christoph said, of Griffith Asia and also of the Australian Institute for International Affairs. So both our hosts. And I've just recently returned yesterday from a little while in Taipei, and very interesting time to be there. Just say a couple of things about the election. Has anyone here seen the Netflix series Wave Makers? Yeah, a few have. If you haven't, compulsory viewing for people like you who are interested in Taiwan. This is a fantastic series on Netflix about a young team marketing.
Going to Australia.
Australia. Sorry, someone's. We're getting some feedback here. And the second thing I would want to say is on Sunday, I went to the Anglican Cathedral there, St. John's, and the preacher was a young guy of Taiwanese background. His name is Ing-wen. And what was interesting about him was he lives in Lichfield in Britain, and that's where he's working. And he flew, he paid for himself to fly all the way to Taiwan just to vote. And many people flew from Australia to vote. I think that underlines how voting has become a really big part of Taiwan's culture today, which makes this elections particularly interesting. And perhaps a surprising note for some of us overseas is that cross-straits relations, not the #1 issue, but we'll hear more about that as the evening progresses. So we've got 4 fantastic panelists here, and we'll be hearing from the panelists, giving their introductions. Then I'm going to ask a couple of questions, and then it's over to you guys to hear in person and online to ask questions, and then we'll close things off just before 7:30. Our speakers will be in this order. So first we'll hear from Douglas Hsu, who's the Chief Representative to Australia of Republic of China, Taiwan. Then we're going to hear Associate Professor Kaiping Huang, who's at Taida, National Taiwan University. And we're going to hear from her from Taipei. Then we're going to hear from Mark Harrison, Senior Lecturer in Chinese Studies at the University in Tasmania and renowned as probably Australia's greatest expert on contemporary Taiwan. And the
Australia. It's gone stupid.
Tippett, ABC.
And not least is going to be Associate Professor Chun-Yi Lee, and she's Director of the Taiwan Research Hub at the University of Nottingham in England. And she's going to come to us from England. So this is going to be a really international panel, and I'm looking forward very much to hearing what they have to say. So please, Douglas, would you mind opening the batting, as it were? Thank you.
Okay, I was told that I have to stand here to speak. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's such a pleasure for me to be able to, be here to talking with you about Taiwan's election. Judging from the turnout of the tonight's audience, I understand that, we have a lot of people here in Australia care about the election in Taiwan. And of course, you care about what's going to happen after the election. However, bad news is we only have, so far, president-elect and vice president-elect. We haven't had a new team yet. So the topic was where the new team of Taiwan is going to lead the country to, right? So, we do not have the new team yet. At least the new team hasn't been officially announced. However, because everybody knows the result, it was the incumbent ruling party won the election. So the incumbent vice president is going to be the next president of Taiwan. So maybe the policy-wise, it won't have too much differences from the current policy. And of course, since we do not have the new team, so maybe we still have a clear direction where we are going to. However, we do have this opportunity to look back about what happened in the past couple of months during the campaign time, and maybe learn something from there and project what's going to happen in the next few months or next 4 years. So when we look back for the past few months during the campaign times, of course, the first thing came to most of the Taiwanese voters' mind is Chinese interference in Taiwan's election. That is of course, everybody knows that China always wants to interfere in Taiwan's election ever since 1996, when we have the first presidential election. However, this year, Chinese interference is up to an unprecedented level, because they use this AI, use other social media and bot account, fake accounts to pull into the public forums, among other techniques. So our national security team actually is working on the pattern of those disinformation operation. And of course, as a responsible stakeholder of the international community, we're happy to share with like-minded countries, when we have those individual analysis coming out. And of course, all these Chinese interference about our election, there's only one purpose: to make sure that DPP won't get reelected. So if we judge from the election outcome, the PRC's interference seems to be not successful. However, it was not that unsuccessful, because this kind of disinformation operation and the spread of the conspiracy through the social media and mainstream media already caused some mindset change among voters. So that may be the reason that you saw a more divided legislative yuan in this coming new Congress. So that was what happened and what our observation was during the campaign. So of course, election was last Saturday, and we immediately know the result. So from last Saturday until now, what had happened? Well, we understand that from the campaign, during the campaign season, we judging from PRC's model of interference about our election, we understand that they already start the next round of coercion through the, well, diplomatic coercion, which we already saw that, well, they successfully, well, have Nauru switch the diplomatic recognition to Beijing. And of course, military exercise. Earlier this morning, perhaps you learned the news that they already started a new round of military exercise around the coastline of mainland. And we expect that economic coercion will continue. And of course, the disinformation operation in the society to make Taiwan's society more divided, that perhaps is going to happen. And of course, all these possible action, there's only one purpose, is to pressure the newly elected government to, well, compromise or yield back on their cross-strait policies. As everybody knows that on the inauguration day, May 20th, the new president is going to deliver a inauguration speech. So in most cases, that's going to be the occasion that the new president lay out his new policy. So during this period of time, after our election until the election day, until the inauguration day, they're going to have a lot of coercion to make sure the new president's going to, well, make compromise on the inaugural speech. So how effective it's going to be, we're going to figure that out on May 20th. And of course, as I mentioned, that we're going to have a even more divided legislative yuan. So the purpose for that disinformation is going to be make a Taiwan society become even more divided, so that well, they can take advantage of this kind of situation. So from what happens in the past few months, you saw the Nauru's case, and you saw, say, Foreign Minister Wang Yi's statements about Taiwan's election, all show that, well, they do have the intentions to continue that coercion. But on the other hand, if you look at what have been doing among those like-minded countries, like United States, like Japan, like European countries, like UK, like Australia, we also found that there is a more coordinated public messaging. Namely, well, right after the election, we saw so many like-minded countries sending congratulatory message to the newly elected president. And well, that was something that we did not see in the past, because I would say we did not see these congratulatory messages come out in such a coordinated way. In addition to the statement, we also saw the US sending a delegation to Taiwan. We saw Japan sending a delegation to Taiwan. We are about to see other countries sending their delegations to Taiwan as well to show their support. So I think that, well, that is to say that even Taiwan does experience or suffer the pressure directly from China. But on the other hand, we are not there alone. We sense that we have more and more countries around the world are willing to step up and stand with Taiwan on this very important democracy issues. So, well, even though I mentioned that the new team hasn't been there yet, but I perhaps can give you some direction about where this new government is going to take us to. So from different perspectives, first, the cross-strait relations. I think the, well, cautious or self-restrained lines or emphasis on the status quo is going to be continued in the next few years. Well, and of course, the newly elected president also understand that in this election, there are voters asking the government to do more to interact with the other side of Taiwan Strait. That was also the reason at his victory speech, President-elect Lai already mentioned that we're going to encourage more exchanges with the other side of Taiwan Strait on the basis of dignity and parity. So, you have to say that it takes two to tango. On this cross-strait relations, you send goodwill, but you need to be respond in a equally friendly gesture. So, at least in the past week, we did not see that happen. In the next couple of months, what we're going to see. And with regard to the defense issues, I think the President-elect Lai's policies is to make sure Taiwan has the capacity to defend ourselves, which means peace. We want peace through strength. So we're going to continue to increase or beef up our asymmetric defense capability, as well as increase the all of society resilience, making sure Taiwan become a countries that we can defend ourselves. And of course, with other like-minded countries, I have to say that, for Biden administration in the past few years, they have this, of course, working with the treaty allies and to apply this integrated deterrence policy. I think so far we observe it works pretty well. So we're going to continue to work with like-minded countries and making sure that we're sending the coordinated message. And of course, with regard to the trade relations, economic and trade is one of the issues that has been discussed. Well, we have to say that the entire world has suffered economic downturns after pandemic. So I think we're going to continue to work on that, making sure Taiwan will sit in a better position. So those are the things I will share with you at this moment. I know my time is limited, but in conclusion, I think we're gonna face this new dynamic after election. So our new team gonna grab all the new opportunities we have and making sure that Taiwan is in a better position dealing with the world. So thank you.
Set us up beautifully, and now we're hoping very much that we can hear from Associate Professor Kai-Ping Huang in Taipei. Are you able to hear us, Kai-Ping?
Yes, I can.
Yes,
Which is big enough, it'll probably send out, I think.
So I think you're able to.
no, that's fine.
Okay, because I didn't get any preparation notice, so may I ask how much time I have?
But there's another one there.
Yes,
So it's good to have that.
later. So, Kai-Ping, if you greetings and welcome from Brisbane, and we. Yeah. And greetings from Brisbane. We look forward to hearing your remarks now. Thank you very much, Kai-Ping.
Thank you. So may I know how much time I have?
Oh, about 10 minutes.
About 10 minutes. So, okay, so I was told that to briefly tell you the electoral results and what I observed about what has happened in this election and what we expect in the future of party politics in Taiwan. So it's possible that I can share the slide I prepared.
I hope so.
Share the slides.
Yeah.
Okay, I think I know how to use it. Okay, so
Good. Excellent. We've got it. Thanks, Kathy.
okay. Let me see that. Let's quickly go to the electoral results. And as you know that we have 3 candidates, and 2 of them were mayors or the current mayor, and the winner is our vice president. And so as you can see that as expected that the results show our ruling party win this election again with 40% of the vote. And so, and our biggest opposition party, that is the Ching-te, ended up in the second. And we have the third party, which like secure like 26% of the votes. So for the presidential election, the results is not very surprising, as expected by a lot of observers before the election. What's surprising is that now neither the DPP nor the KMT had the majority of seats in the legislature. So even though TPP only has 8 seats, but this 8 seats is very important and critical because either party needs these 8 seats to cross over the majority threshold, that is 57 seats or 57 votes. And which means that TPP, although it's a small party, but now he can block key oppositions or bills that proposed either by the DPP or the KMT. And that's what's interesting for this election. And so a lot of people, if you know Taiwan's politics pretty well, you know that Taiwanese politics is dominated by these 2 mainstream parties for the past 30 years. So why now we have a rising third party? I call it rising because now it occupies a very important position. And I think that it emerges out of this anti-establishment sentiment. But is this a populist party? I think this article just published after election day, and it said that it's published on Journal of Democracy, and it said that the DPP is a personalistic and even populist party, and it also said that this party promised to follow Tsai's cross-strait policies. And well, let's see whether the characteristic of Ko's supporters. Okay, so we know that the most important ideological cleavage in Taiwan is one national identity, and the other one is the attitude toward unification and independence. And so as you can see that, you know, here is from the web survey we conducted in mid-December. So if the voter intended to vote for Lai, that's their position toward national identity. So a lot of the majority of them say that they identify themselves as Taiwanese. And so this is, and for those who has the intention to vote for Hou You-yi, that's KMT's candidate, they say that they tend to say that they are both, you know, Chinese and Taiwanese. And for Ko's supporter, it's more aligned to those who has this undecided attitude when casting the vote. Okay, in terms of unification independence attitude, again, Ko supporters is more close to those undecided, and a lot of them actually saying that they support the status quo, but they don't support unification. They are anti-unification. And so that's the majority, but you can see that the DPP supporters are close to, I mean, you know, T2 were the status quo independence, and TPP's and KMT supporters is tilted to status quo but anti-independence and status quo pro-unification. Okay, so in terms of cross-strait measures, that's the new question I proposed. And you can see that actually most of them, for the TPP supporters, they think that we should maintain economic interaction with China, or we should still have this political opposition toward China. But host supporters are more inclined to have this economic and political interaction, and so do the TPP supporters, which means that co-supporters actually favor a middle ground approach to cross-strait relations. The TPP believes like demonstrating goodwill can lower the temperature and avoid harsher measures like trade restrictions or military escalation. So, which means that, unlike the Ching-te and DPP, TPP supporters are more into this middle ground approach. Whether that can be kept is another question, but in terms of cross-strait relations or ideological cleavage, they actually occupy the middle ground. That's something we need to remember. So then I think we can just skip this. So if they prefer, TPP supporter prefers a middle ground approach toward China, then what do they prefer? Then it means that there are other issues that are attracted to them. So that's why they support Ing-wen and his party. So from this slide, that's the comments I downloaded from selected YouTube videos. And you can see that for DPP supporters, opposing China is the same as defending democracy. So you can see here, democracy, China, protect this. And for KMT supporters, DPP must be ousted in order for peace to prevail. So they want, because they perceive that the DPP would probably would tag Taiwan, to a very dangerous situation. And that's also the electoral thing they have this year. And for TPP supporters, they oppose the blue and green in favor of better governance, which means that they are people who are not satisfied with the performance of either the KMT or the DPP, and so they support Ing-wen because they admire his transparent pragmatism and his execution ability, and most importantly, they believe that he's not corrupt. And if he were the president, he would make everything public. Okay, so I know that this time a lot of people talk about whether the pre-electoral polls were accurate enough to predict who would be the final winner, and so I think the TPP before the election, a lot of people, or at least some observers, and even the party itself, believe that they might end up in the second, and it was still difficult to defeat Lai Ching-te, but still the party had a chance to end up in the second place. And so from the polls they released, we can see that actually the TPP supporters were mostly like people under 40. So they are very young voters, and so they don't have this strong affiliation with either DPP or KMT. But as people get older, they tend to identify, either of the two mainstream parties. Anyway, so for TPP, the problem is, it really depends on the voter turnout rate to determine the final result. Unfortunately, they garnered a lot of support among those under 40, but also these people tend to have jobs and they tend to not live in their household registration locations. So on the election day, they were not able to vote, and that's why the TPP did not secure the second place as they expected before the election. So, and another issue is because the TPP has a lot of young supporters, so a lot of people think that maybe this party, use some, which means that they just garner this unsatisfaction atmosphere, and then it's a populist party. So let's see this. This is the website we did before the election, and you can see that for this question, powerful people usually care about their own interests and not that the majority of the people. And although a majority of Taiwanese voters say yes to this question, but for those who say no, I think TPP supporters and also those who plan to vote for lie, they tend not to think that powerful people usually care much about their own interest. So which means that among the opposition parties, supporters of opposition parties, there are a very strong anti-elitism atmosphere among them. But do they also against hegemonic leader and anti-institutionalism? Anyway, when you look at this, actually, these lie supporters actually say yes. There are more of them saying yes, that our country needs a leader with unlimited power to act on behalf of the people. And also lie and host supporters agree that the government that enjoys the support of the people should be able to do whatever it wants, even if it's outside the law, which means that KER and TPP are anti-establishment. That I agree, but they are not populist because their supporters do not endorse hegemonic leader. Their supporters they don't endorse anti-institutionalism. But anyway, but the difference is really minor. It's not that large. So at least we can conclude that people of all parties support democracy and checks and balances in Taiwan. Okay, so in terms of negative campaign, I think this time what I observed and I'm really worried is about negative campaign staged by the media. So I know like Taiwan is a democracy and we usually ended up in the top of freedom of speech, freedom of press, and we are really proud of that. But this kind of freedom is enjoyed by the two main parties, but not small parties. So when it comes to political news, usually you will see that the mainstream parties either ally with the DPP or the KMT, and sometimes they jointly attack the opposition party. The third opposition party. So, and this is perceived by voters themselves. So we ask voters in the media reports how much you observe. You observe a lot of negative news or positive news toward a certain candidate, and we can see that a lot of voters agree that the issue saw a lot of negative reports about Ke Wen-je in the media. Okay, so and in terms of negativity, whether candidate strategy, but they also perceive that personal attack is perceived used most by Ke Wen-je. So that's the okay. So then, because I have a project, I want to use text data to predict the electoral results, and so we use the semantic brain score. It's a measure of brain importance calculated on text data, and representing a contribution to the research on brand equity and on word occurrence networks. So it's used in business to know that the popularity of a brand or the importance of a brand. And then we use the same concept to measure the brand importance among political parties. And so that's what we see. When you see that, positive, when you have more, larger SBS score, that means you have a strong brand. Then when you have a strong brand, that also means that can improve your poll rating, right? So it is exactly what's happening to Lai Ching-te. So as time progresses, the SBS increases and so does his poll numbers, but not for Hou You-yi, the KMT's candidate. So his poll actually increases when SBS score gets lower. So when his kind of, not so emphasized by the media reports, actually his rating improves. And it's the same for Ing-wen. So what does that mean? So if SBS means, brand name popularity, then it should have the same effect across 3 candidates. But we only saw positive relationship in Lai Ching-te's case, but not Hou You-yi or Ing-wen's. So which means negative campaigns. So which means that when these 2 candidates got news, usually it's really not good news. It's bad news, and that can affect their polling rate. And so I also ran some regression and to see that, yeah. So do I have much time? How many minutes do I have?
If you can start to wind up, please. Thanks very much.
Okay, so I pretty much already have this. So anyway, so looking forward, I think Taiwan still have this robust democracy. I think don't look at TPP's rise as a big thing. I think his rise is very important to bring Taiwan back to focus on domestic problems and improve governance. So we have done very well in international relations, but we still have to focus on our domestic problems to make our democracy even robust and persistent. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's dive into what drives voters. Mark, over to you now.
Well, thanks very much to the AIIA for the invitation, to the Griffith Asia Institute and to Rowan and everybody. I'll crack on. Just some broad comments about the election. I think Lai's victory was a solid one. I think getting over 40% of the vote was symbolically significant, and with the other 2 candidates in the 30s and 20s. So there was no sense that the vote was contested, really, for the presidency. For the Legislative Yuan, I think one of the interesting parts of that result was that the DPP actually got the most number of votes, but they just got them in the wrong places. So there's some interesting questions for the DPP about tactics, electoral tactics. I think they made some mistakes in some electorates where they could have done better if they'd been a little more tactical. And so it's not inconceivable that instead of 52-51 came to DPP, we would have had it the other way around. And I think that speaks to the complexity of Taiwan's electoral system. Just on the new Lai team and what that might mean, I think, as Douglas has alluded to, it is unknown. So the critical positions haven't been filled. We don't know who the foreign minister is, the defense minister, and we don't know who the premier is. And so the shape of the Lai government, I think, is very much up in the air. The KMT has the most number of seats in the LY, and they've just nominated Han Guoyu as their candidate for Speaker of the LY. And he's a person, he's a thing, and I think that's going to be really interesting to see how he and his particular political persona plays out in that very complex political environment. The role of the Premier, which is the head of the executive, will be very critical in managing the LY, and I think we're going to see some really tough politics there. In Lai's campaign, he really emphasised continuity with Tsai Ing-wen. there was a campaign ad which was very celebrated, which was literally the two of them in a car, and President Tsai literally handing over the driving to Lai Ching-te, and they were doing a huantao, so they were doing circumnavigating the island, which is a very symbolically meaningful thing to do in Taiwan's public culture, the idea of circulating around the entire island. So he emphasized that very, very strongly. We also see continuity with the vice presidential candidate, Xiaobi Kim. She's, I think you could say, is a Tsai protege. I think she's had a very long and very, very, very tough political career. But she certainly has been very much on board with President Tsai, very experienced. Her working relationship with Lai Ching-te, I think, will be one of the defining themes of his presidency. So I think she's going to have a much more important role than he did as vice president. And so that dynamic will be very intriguing to see how that plays. She has a very strong personality, and so is he, but I think there's going to be some interesting things there. It's also the case that President Tsai, from 2019, established a kind of team-based approach to running her government. So she divided up messaging. She had different parts of the government messaging in different ways. Certainly what I've heard is that isn't necessarily the way that Lai Ching-te will run his presidency, but it's all up for grabs. I'll say a little bit now about China. So PRC hostility is a given. So there'll be military threats, there'll be trade coercion, there'll be disinformation, all of those things that China does. China faces some very significant economic problems at the moment, and so the political dynamic, the dynamics of China policy in Taiwan has shifted quite significantly, as it has here. So I think China isn't feeling quite where it might have been, say, 3 or 4 years ago. There were 2 major Taiwan statements by Beijing in 2022 and last year. In 2022 was a white paper, which is belligerent but not unsurprising. Late last year, there was a very strange document issued by the State Council and the Politburo that spoke about unification from the point of view of Fujian-Taiwan integration, particularly around cultural and social integration, which obviously landed like a damn squib in Taipei, but it was what I think it might lean, or one could read from it, an interest in discourse power, as the Chinese call it, from the China side. So really being interested in shaping perceptions, shaping identities, trying to intervene in that part of Taiwan's life. And we've had some public comments in Australia from the ambassador on the other side, both before and after the election. He gave a press conference on Wednesday, and that alluded to that theme as well. Some very strong comments about Australians needing to understand Taiwan in the correct way and having our understanding corrected. And it's interesting in the sense that Beijing might feel that Australia-Taiwan relations are becoming a little warm for it to be comfortable with. And so I wonder whether that might be a theme going forward, Beijing trying to intervene more directly, both in Taiwan but elsewhere as well in Australia, including Australia, in the way we talk about Taiwan as a place. That's an issue for us because our Taiwan policy capacity is very thin, and our policy systems are very risk averse when it comes to Taiwan, and that makes them vulnerable to that kind of discourse power effects. Having said that, I think it's also the case that there have been some important shifts in Australia with respect to Taiwan in the last several years. And one of the key takeaways for me about the election was the quality of Australian media reporting of the election. And so I felt that there's been a real step change in improving the quality. I think the reporting that was coming out of all of the major media outlets with Australian-based journalists in Taipei was really, really good. I mean, it was really fantastic. Compared to particularly Europe and the United Kingdom, you could really see the UK's reporting is shocking. But ours was really fantastic. And that's a really important development. So Beijing might be seeing Australians becoming, from its point of view, overly sympathetic and wanting to intervene in that. I'll conclude with some comments about Australia. As we've been talking about, I think it's going to be a more divisive political scene in Taiwan, with the Legislative Yuan having the structure that it has, and the 3rd DPP term. And that makes, from outside, misinterpretations more likely. because Taiwanese politics is quite complicated. Things can happen in politics that make a lot of sense in Taiwan, but don't make a lot of sense outside of it, as is the case in any democracy. An example that I have here is the National Day speeches on Double 10 on October the 10th. So the pattern is that the president gives a speech and the Speaker of the Legislative Yuan gives a speech. Now that's been fine in recent years because we've had Yoshi-kun and Tsai Ing-wen. Now, in theory, we could have Ching-te and Han Kuo-yu both giving speeches on Double 10. And that's going to be really weird, I have to say. I don't know how to... So the politics of that are going to be really bizarre and very contentious. So that's a challenging to understand because you've really got to know Taiwan well to understand that dynamic and why that would be the case. Just in conclusion, I think this puts greater demands upon the TECO officers in Australia, and I refer obviously to Douglas in that moment, to communicate the more complex and equivocal domestic politics in Taiwan to Australian policymakers, politicians, policy analysts, and so on. But of course, because we do not have formal diplomatic relations with Taiwan, TECO is constrained in how effective it can be. So there are things we can do in Australia. I think stepping up the pace of unofficial engagement, so track 2 dialogues, policy events, all of that sort of stuff, doing it at a greater pace than we have been doing traditionally in Australia, I think would be really, really valuable. I think we need the kind of grounded and kind of adult understanding of Taiwan's politics so that we don't underreact or overreact to events in Taiwan. So if there's some drama about the double 10 speeches, we need to understand where that's come from and not be confused and sort of panicked by it, which we can have. Final point, Taiwan is an incredibly complicated place, and it sits in such a complicated place in the world. It's both inside and outside the international system, and that creates really, really complex effects. So there are so many moving parts to Taiwan's place, and making sense of it is very difficult. We haven't talked about the United States, but there's an election in the US at the end of this year, and the outcome of that election will be incredibly consequential for us and for Taiwan. It's theoretically possible, at least, that Donald Trump could be re-elected as president, and then, we're really in a very unknown space if that happens. So the final point, it's such a complex relationship, and it takes a lot of thinking through all of the dynamics and all of the parts, both domestically and internationally, to make sense of it, and we need to do more of it in Australia. So thanks very much.
Thanks so much, Mark. And our final speaker, Chun-Yi, you've been very patient, and it's early in the day there in Nottingham, and over to you.
Rowan, and thank you all for inviting me. And it is a great pleasure that I can learn in an early morning of all the Taiwanese elections, most updated analysis from all the previous speakers, and especially appreciate Ambassador Xi. So as the last speaker, what I can conclude or I can provide my observations only to add on the previous panelists already said all the very precise and insightful observations. But some points I would like to supplement to what we have been discussed about this Taiwan election just happened last week. First thing, as all the speakers just also mentioned about, I think this is a victory of a democracy, which means that it is an election peacefully held, organized, and the result has been also peacefully accepted by the whole Taiwanese people. So in view of all this instability situation in the world, I think that Taiwan's peaceful election and election result being accepted, it is a great victory of the whole Taiwanese population in that sense. Well, a lot of previous speakers also indicated that this is an unsurprising result, which is true, that before the election, most of the observers or spectators already foresee that it is highly possible the governing party, DPP, will win in a margin percentage, which that is result that DPP secured 40% of the voters, KMT secured 33% of the voter support, and the rising third party, as Dr. Huang just mentioned, TPP, secured 26% of the voters' support. Well then, of course, it is a victory of the DPP, but it also sent a little bit of the warning signals of the DPP, for the reason that in 2020, when President Tsai was competing with the KMT candidate Han Kuo-yu, a very interesting person, as Mark just indicated, President Tsai actually secured 58% of the voter support, and the KMT back then under Han's campaign only secured 38% of the voter support. You would say that actually DPP seems like to slide 18% of the supporters from 58 to 40 to this year's presidential election. And this is what we see, that the third party TPP emerged. Well, Dr. Huang also indicates TPP has a lot of secured a lot of the younger voters support, which are probably under 40 years old in Taiwan. And the question or the point that why younger generation would support TPP, I align or support or second what Dr. Wang just said. It is also because of the leader Ke Pi, which is Ke Wen-je. He's very direct, and also he's very sort of like not being biased or influenced by the party politics. But I think there's also actually quite important issue to be considered, that is a day-to-day bread and butter business. Taiwanese people, or most of the younger generation, feel that the inflation is high, and the house price is very high for them to afford, and their salaries are very low, stagnant for the past 30-20 years. So they've seen not really a hope of the current government, and they felt they don't want it to align with the pro-Beijing government, which is KMT. The third party, TPP, emerged just 4 years, but they feel that this leader, Ke Pi or Ke Wen-je, he actually spoke what they want to know, which are their day-to-day worries, their low wage, and their anxieties of securing a house, establish a family. So I can see that this is a trend of Taiwan have more considering of what is happening with their life, rather than be caught into the traditional, conventional KMT, DPP dichotomy of the China factor. But it doesn't mean the China factor is not important. It's still important. It's just to say that the younger supporters feel like there's more in their daily life they wanted to face, which is an encouraging sign and a nature sign. But what led these to us, all the speakers also mentioned about, is a more diverse or split politics in the legislative yuan. In the UK, we called this is a hung parliament, which means that there's no majority of the party to secure the seat. DPP only has 51, KMT 52, and the key minority, which the TPP, secured 8. And that does mean that DPP government needs to negotiate and need to reconciliate and discuss with KMT and TPP. And most likely, DPP would like to align with the TPP. We don't know. This is my own guess or speculation in that sense. But it does mean that the policy implementation needs much more discussion, negotiation, and implementation needs to have more rigorous inspection. So that is what we can see domestically, what probably will perceive, no matter who to be the legislative yuan speaker or premier, in that sense that it's lost to negotiate domestically. Internationally, we see, well, we talk about China, we cannot not to talk about China in that sense. And we actually also saw the immediate reaction from China is to cut off another diplomatic ally with Taiwan. That is a very tiny, small island, Nauru. which swift their diplomatic relations with Taiwan to China within 48 hours after the presidential election result to be known. This is not a surprise either. China has always been cornered Taiwan's diplomatic allies internationally, and this is one of the things they can flex their muscle to sort of punish Taiwan with quotation mark. And another thing that China has been threatened Taiwan was to suspend the AIIA, which is Economic Cooperation Framework Agreement signed in 2010 under Ma Ying-jeou Ching-te's government. That was a semi-free trade agreement between China and Taiwan. China already suspends some of the items before the election, and China threatened Taiwan that it would suspend as a whole of the AIIA if the DPP won. Now DPP won. We will wait and see what will that mean. What will China do with the AIIA? Would these two actions impact on Taiwan? The first diplomatic island, because very sorry to see Nauru switched their side to China, but to be honest, Taiwan has been fighting along Taiwan's international space for a very long time, and Taiwan has been really excellently exercised of the track to diplomacy. Taiwan's link to the world, of course, we wanted to have more formal diplomatic relations, but it's more substance relations with the world. And I think that this only see how narrow-minded China is, and this is, again, not really a surprise. The AIIA suspension, what will that impact on Taiwan? It will impact on Taiwan's economic development for sure. I'm not saying that it won't. However, Taiwan's economic relations already started to shift from China to the rest of the world, especially under President Tsai's new southbound policy. So considerable investment already transferred or diverged from China to the Southeast Asia countries. If that is not enough, actually, the US-China trade war helped even further Taiwanese investment to be diverted away from China. So the AIIA will hurt Taiwan, but since the investment, Taiwan's investment to China, or Taiwan's economic interaction with China already being reduced, the AIIA, if they would suspend it from the China side, it will hurt, but not dramatically. Now, what would be the potential situation with the US? Well, as Mark just mentioned about the Vice President Xiao Beiqing, who actually was an ambassador from Taiwan to the US before, who not only has been really working closely with President Tsai, but she is also a very gracious diplomatic negotiator, representative, ambassador from Taiwan to the US. And I think, and she has a very pretty name, Cat Warrior, against China's Wolf Warrior, if you remember. So I think that is a very encouraging sign to have a smooth negotiation, a smooth dialogue between Taiwan and US. And of course, sincerely hope no matter who will be the president-elect in the US in November this year, this smooth channel or discussion between Taiwan and US will continue. And I will end here for the panel to have further discussion or questions.
Thank you, Sam. Nicely touched on other key issues, so that I think across our panel we've done really well. I'm going to ask the first question. I'm going to take the advantage of sitting where I am to do that, and then we'll open the floor. My question is about this. I know the government isn't going to be inaugurated until May the 20th, as Douglas has said, and the new parliamentarians won't be sworn in until February the 1st. But we must have a sense that policies will change. And as we've heard, voters have expressed discontent, particularly in economic areas. can I ask the panel to put on their thinking caps about the future and pontificate a bit, hypothesize, where do you think policies will change? We've already heard President-elect Lai say that he's going to consider incorporating members from beyond his party in his government team, which will be a first. So that will imply that some of those new policies will come in. Policies will change in terms of, maybe in terms of trade, we've just been hearing about, in terms of wages, in terms of elder care, childcare, very important issues, and the energy mix, I should mention. Very important to us in Australia because we're selling at the moment about $14 billion of coal, that's to produce steel, but also to produce energy. We're also selling $9 billion a year of gas to Taiwan, and the ruling party has a program of getting out of nuclear power altogether. Was over half, but now it's about 8% of generation. Maybe that decline will stop at the present 8%, or maybe not. I don't know. I'd be very interested to hear what people think of the energy mix. And of course, in renewables, Australia is also in the game, with Macquarie investing hundreds of millions of dollars in huge wind farms off the coast. So please, perhaps we can go in the order that we originally spoke in. Any thoughts, Douglas, on new policies that we might look for in the new team?
Well, as I say, I'm a foreign service officer. I cannot say that, well, we are changing our policy.
Oh, it's just between us.
Yeah, but what I would say that in general, our national security related policy will still remain the same, as I mentioned to you or elaborate to you earlier, because we think that no matter it's foreign policy or defense policy, well, I think we feel more and more confident walking down to this pace. So that I think that with regard to the foreign policy and defense policy will still be the same. However, what will be the difference? Well, maybe during the campaign season, there are a lot of the younger generation who care about this housing issue. So the housing issue, how to deal with that? Well, if we have the perfect solution, I think all the Australians are going to come to Taiwan to ask for that, right? So that is a big issue. However, the new government will definitely pay attention to the call from the younger generation and try to address that issues. And of course, the low income or low salary has been a big issue in Taiwan for a long time. And in this a new, dynamic is, under current industries structures, it will be difficult to make big change. However, I think the new government will have to face that issue. With regard to the energy, very short, I think that, the directions have been there. So we're going to reduce the nuclear power, and we're going to replace with the renewable energy. In the meantime, when the renewable energy is ready with full capacity, we're going to use the LNG, which Australia is going to play a big role in that. And of course, we are looking for new options for energy. Hydrogen is one of them. So, well, of course, the technology is not there yet. So we definitely would like to work with our Australian counterpart to explore those possibilities, which is definitely a big issue here.
Thank you. Thanks very much for kicking off. Very brave of you. And Kai Ping, any thoughts on how policy may change? Kai Ping.
Microphone.
Is your microphone working, Kylie?
Sorry.
Oh, that's good.
Okay, I forgot I mute myself. Okay, so my opinion is the same as the ambassadors. I think in terms of international relations, we will just have the same direction as President Tsai Ing-wen is leading. So in terms what changes might be how we make policies. So I think the new party, at least, I mean, in terms of PPP, they focus on judicial reform, and they also want to make governance much better, more transparent, more efficient. And I think that if the two main parties really cooperate and really pay attention to domestic problems, I think that in the future we will have a stronger Taiwan, which it's not just have this strong support from the international community. I mean, as Taiwan itself, we will have a strong, better economy. We will have young voters of young people who have much more, who have regained their hope toward this country. And so all these positive effects will just benefit everyone, including our allies like the US and Australia. So at least I'm very optimistic about this change in the legislature. I'm looking forward to this more cooperation among the three parties.
Thank you so much. Mark.
Yeah, so all the three parties went to the election with public housing policies, and so you'd have to assume that they're going to, or the DPP will try and enact some of that, and so they'll be building public housing, which is kind of the solution that they presented to the problem of housing. On energy, energy is such a policy disaster in Taiwan, and it has been for so many years. I mean, I think lots of policy work to do, but a lot of it will be just trying to untangle or unscramble what is a really, really difficult issue. There are huge energy subsidies for consumers, which are very difficult electorally to touch. So Mainja tried that in 2010, I think, and his polling numbers just crashed. It was incredible. So I think there's lots of work to be done, but it's politically very difficult. Taiwan, I think the renewable pathway is kind of presented as the answer to that, to a much bigger energy policy mess generally. So plenty of work there. Yeah, international relations, I think it'll continue. Lots of social policies, Indigenous reconciliation, very important, particularly to Saudi Kim, and so I think we'll see plenty of that as well. Those kind of progressive social policies. So yeah, I think continuity with trying to deal with some of these perennial policy problems. That I think the voters, the electoral result I thought was interesting because essentially the DPP was rewarded for its international relations and its foreign policy through the presidency, but it was punished through its domestic policy in the legislature. So I think they'll be spending a lot of time trying to get that straightened out.
Thanks, Mark. And Chun-Yi, any thoughts about policy?
Yes, I think, well, all the speakers just mentioned that it has to going through with the negotiations of the domestic policy, including housing. Mark mentioned about the public housing, but to my understanding is to have 6 years lower rents for the younger generation. So there's still a lot of issues they have to go through apart from housing. And we mentioned about low wage. I think NHS, the National Health System, also is another important emerging issue to Taiwan, which is not much of a surprising as I'm in the UK. The NHS is really, really not very good. Anyway, so domestically, I think that definitely, and Ron, you mentioned about the energy issue, which is very important, especially Taiwan, as all of us are aware of, is the advanced chips manufacturing, semiconductor. So it absorbs a lot of the island's energy supply, electricity, water. So all these are actually very important for Taiwan to sustain as the leading producer of the semiconductor. And needless to mention how crucial that is for Taiwan, not only economically, but also geopolitically. So domestic issue, they need to find a solution, either to reach out to different parties, as Ryan just mentioned, the possibility to look into the more of a sustainable policy for the future, or they have to come out a better implementation plan. And internationally, just one point I think I would like to address is, I think the government would also proceed more of the international relation, especially through the trading possibility. That is, if we remember that Taiwan applied to join the CPTPP in September 2021 and has been really waiting whether that will be permitted into as a member. I know it is a very tricky issue, but it is also that Australia is the member of the CPTPP. UK also recently being recruited and being admitted as a member of the CPTPP. So I would think that it's possible, or let's see if there's any creative way of Taiwan would be included or being admitted to the CPTPP. I know that China is waiting to see how that would pan out, because China also applied to join the CPTPP. But this is, again, an arena to see how dynamics internationally China-Taiwan's competition will pan out.
Well, true. Thank you very much, Ching-te. And thanks, panel. And now over to the floor. David, I saw you first.
Okay. Two things. One for Douglas and maybe Mark. Between 1973 and 83, I did a study of Pinmin, poor people, welfare recipients in Taiwan. Out of 26 families, 10 years later, 19 of them have been able to buy an apartment. 6 years later, you had the movement of snails without shells. So this problem of housing goes back 30 some years now. And it seems strange to me that nothing has really been done about it. The other question is more for Kai-ping. You mentioned that something about the KMT saying that the DPP must be wiped out. Is that the feeling of Ho Yo-i, or is that mainly the influence of Zhao Xiaokang and the old guard of the KMT? Because I say this in the context of comments about Shi Mingde's death recently, coming from Zhang Wan'an, coming from other people who would have been members of parties that were his greatest enemies when he was active. And it seems to me that there's more of a conciliation now among parties and among people than there were 20, 30 years ago.
Thanks, David. So first of all, anything more on housing?
Yes, well, I have to say that with regard to the housing issues, I think that may be something that most of the Australian people cannot or sense to, because you have the big lands and Taiwan is an island, and we only have limited lands, especially in the past few decades. There's a workforce flow from the small town to the big city, and that is why nowadays, if you would like to work on this public apartment project, well, in the big city like Taipei, New Taipei City, there is no government-owned land. Most of the government-owned land was like in the countryside. So, but nobody wanted to live apartment over there. So that is the maybe the development of the countries, and is not that balanced in past few years. And of course, for example, at my hometown, Chiayi City, for over past, I would say, 3 decades, the population never increased, because the population of the residents the number of residents never increased. Always like 200,000 to 250,000 people. Most of the students when, for example, myself, when I went to the university, I moved to Taipei and I find job over there. So, it's the natural human flow, and with a small island that have those limitations.
Housing, yeah, I mean, I think housing is a perennial policy problem in many national settings, including Australia. It's not that different. And I think you get interests, you get no government wants to see property prices fall because the owners of property are very upset when that happens. And so yeah, so Taiwan has been a bit stuck in that kind of mode. Yeah, I think our housing markets are not as dissimilar as you might indicate. I think housing here is incredibly overpriced. But the policies required and the effects of those policies to make housing more affordable have very complex and difficult flow-on effect for the rest of the economy. Taiwan the same.
Thank you. And Kai Ping, anything to say about that thought of David's that perhaps the bitterness that was such a factor in politics decades ago has softened a little?
Actually, I think when they say that they oppose the DPP doesn't mean that to wipe it out from Taiwan's politics. It actually means power transfer. It's like, we need to replace the ruling party in order to maintain peace with China. The KMT stance is always more pro-China. So they believe that to maintain a good relationship with China, we can have it can ensure our safety and security. So that's their rationale. In terms of so that's why the electoral theme for KMT this time is peace and war. So which means that selecting KMT, you can have peace, but if you choose DPP, the war is going to coming up. So whether that message persuaded voters is another matter. As far as I can see, 70% of voters did not were not persuaded by this message.
Thank you. And Chun-Yi, any comments to those thoughts?
Well, I just thought that I agree that the housing, especially pressure David just mentioned, the snares without share, because I use that at my lecture to teach students that it is a global phenomenon of the housing burden also happening in Taiwan. But I think the more to the point, I also agree that it is, as both Ambassador Xu and also Mark mentioned, that it is a situation, Taiwan's a small island and it's developing economic fastly. But I think the issue also related to that is a low wage, which is a stagnant wage structure, which make the younger generation feel like there's no hope to afford more, the rising house price. So I think that is connected to be considered. How to resolve that, have no idea that can be done. But I hope the incoming government will, I think they are paying more attention on those issues. And in relation to the KMT DPP's reconciliation, I think in our academic blog, Taiwan Insight, we actually just published the memorial piece for Shi Mingde. And I think that Shi Mingde is a phenomenal figure, which actually he was a person that cross parties would think that he was one of the legacy for Taiwan's democracy. So on that note, let's note it together, reconcile together for that matter. But if that's an election campaign, I think that KMT and DPP are still head-to-head. There's not much of the room there, especially I think this time KMT, their election campaign was war or peace, which ironically or interestingly align with the CCP's slogan, war or peace. If you choose KMT, that is peace. If you choose DPP, that is war. I just leave the audience on this note.
Thank you very much. And we've got time for one question online. I'm sorry, but speakers in the room aren't going away. So, please, Kelsey, yeah.
Yeah, so we had Rowan who asked, what is the future of Taiwan's engagement with Indo-Pacific regions, particularly those new southbound countries under the new leadership?
Thank you. So, a question about the new southbound policy, which is Taiwan's policy, which President-elect Lai will certainly continue, I think, about engaging with Southeast Asia particularly, and India. Douglas.
Sure. I think that we're going to continue that policies engaging with Southeast Asian countries even more, because in the past few years, not only a new southbound policy itself, but because of the pandemic, earlier we have speakers mentioned about that we have a new movement of those Taiwanese investments in China in the past few years. They moved to other destinations. Well, one of them is Southeast Asia. So we see more and more potential that we have a strong Taiwanese businessmen presence in Southeast Asia, including India as well. So definitely we're going to see more opportunity there. And I think the new government is going to grab that opportunity to, achieve more.
Thank you. Anyone else want to come in? And I think also, of course, this is happening as mainland China is suffering from severe problems in its own economic development, and so it's kind of flows on. Many other countries in the world are seeking greater diversification than they've had before, including Australia. So I think I'm going to close this now, and I've just got a couple of things I want to say before I thank the panel. One is I've had requests from Kai Ping. If you're able to send us a copy of your beautiful slides, would that be possible? Thank you, so that people here will be able to see them and think about them.
Okay, sure.
Thank you very much. That would be great. So they will be available to people online or people in the room who'd be interested. Second thing I just wanted to mention is I was remiss for not acknowledging the presence here. And we've talked about, Mark talked about stepping up non-official engagement and possibilities, particularly of greater business engagement with Taiwan. People here may not know, Taiwan has become Australia's 4th biggest export market, very major market. And we have in the room here John Toigo, who's the chairman of the Australia-Taiwan Business Council. John, could you just stand up? And so anyone who doesn't know John, who's interested in doing business with Taiwan, and I think I have to disclose I'm one of the 2 vice chairs of John and ATBC. And of course, we're keen to build up that business relationship, which is something which is completely consonant. Everyone understands with Australia's One China policy as well. So just now I want to thank all the panelists for fantastic contribution. Pretty well no big topic was avoided. All the big topics were touched on in my view. And thank you particularly for Chun-Yi and Kai Ping, who it's always a challenge to come on to a room from outside. Thank you so much, Chun-Yi, for getting up early in the day in Nottingham, and Kai Ping for giving us the benefits of your research. And in the room here, Mark, your great expertise and wisdom, and fantastic that Ambassador Xu, you've come along to give us your thoughts and your frank thoughts, if I can say so, which we're very appreciative of. So over to you now, Paul.
Well, thanks very much, Rowan, who I might add is a fellow of the AIIA, for wonderful chairing. And of course, you can't do that without being having the knowledge that you have of the subject material. And thank you for your panellists. My name is Paul Lucas. I'm the Queensland President of the AIIA, and we're delighted to have you here. We thank Holly Redlick for letting us be here. This is the biggest crowd that we've had that I can remember in recent years, both in person and online, so that's great credit to the speakers and the subject matter. I'm here just to say a few things. You should consider, if you're not, being a member of the AIIA. State branch is $110 a year, $35 for a student, $80 for a senior retiree. And we like to encourage couples, not too much more for a couple, because we believe your affairs should be international, not domestic. And a small increase in that. So what have we got coming up? A number of really interesting talks. Christoph Nedepel is going to be speaking next on the 6th of February, of course, the incoming Director of Griffith Asia, on engaging China for a sustainable Asia strategic issues. So you'll get to hear him. Then we'll have on the 13th of February a very interesting speaker, Roman Washchuk, the former Canadian ambassador to Ukraine, but now in retirement, the Ukraine Small Business Commissioner and Ombudsman. So he so liked the country, he now works for it. And he'll be here in person, which will be a very interesting topic. And then on 12th of March, we'll have the very engaging speaker from UQ, Professor Shahab Hamiri, who'll be talking about COVID, locked up country, learning lessons from Australia's COVID response. And indeed, he's written a book about that, which will be available as well. We've got a number of other speakers that are coming up that we'll publish on our website. Thanks, everybody, for being here tonight. We do hope that we can see you in future. If you are a member, any of these events are free, as are any other events on the same basis as other state branches. Thanks very much.